from my loyal viewers here on the WardyNYM platform. Here, my stream has been just about as good as the Mets bullpen. Absolutely horrendous, falling apart right before our very eyes. So we're going to try this a third time. So first and foremost, everybody chiming in live on a replay. Happy to have you all in here. How you doing, everybody? It's your boy Wardy, and we're back at it with the latest Metropolitan post-game segment as the Mets lose an embarrassing series loss, I should say, after again having a 5-run lead in Game 2 of your matchup yesterday. You, of course, cough that up because Tyler McGill can't get out of his own way, and the bullpen, of course, 4 relievers in the 8th inning, walking 4 batters. Of course you're not going to have success. Edwin Diaz being out with the suspension continues to hurt this Mets team in many ways, being down an arm in said pen, and even after making a bunch of corresponding moves, with Tyler McGill being sent down an hour after I told you all in yesterday's postgame show that he would be, based on his latest lack of performance and the Mets in dire need of arms. They've since caught up Tyler J and Matt Festa, the New York native who grew up a diehard Yankees fan, funny enough, would be the man that would absolutely blow this game open in the Astros' favor in extras after a roughly 3-hour-long rain delay. Between the Mets not having offense outside of WardyNYM, again, if you're not named WardyNYM, you were absolutely nothing on the offensive end for the Mets today. If you're not Brandon, you were nothing here. And again, combining that with a bullpen unbelievably taxed, unbelievably gassed, and in dire need of Edwin Diaz, of Sean Reed-Foley, among others, back in said bullpen, we have a series defeat like never before. And I shouldn't say never before, but series defeat like never before that we saw here in the month of June. The Grimace era is officially dead. As much as I love that candy corn looking mofo dressed in purple, he is dead on the side of the road. Unfortunately, the Grimace run has come to an end, but you know what the old saying is? Just because one thing ends doesn't mean a new beginning can't be here for the Mets. And hopefully what was a joyful June transitions into a joyful July. Hopefully, fingers crossed. The Mets have a massive 3-game set starting tomorrow against the Washington Nationals. So how are they going to fare in that matchup? How did they fare in this one? Let's break down what transpired inning by inning, how the Mets ultimately lost here against the Astros. I summarized it for you, but we're going to break it down inning by inning as we always do here in the live show, live on YouTube, the #1 post-game show on YouTube, of course, covering the Metropolitans. Thank you all so much for being in here. Greatly appreciate it. We're going to get into the highlights. Luis Severino, of course, with not his best outing, but far from his worst. We're going to talk about the highlights, what stood out on the pitching end. Outside of Sevy, Adrian Hauser continues to solidify himself as one of the best, multi-aim relievers the Mets could find themselves asking for. On the hitting end, again, WardyNYM got the Mets offense quite literally started and ended today. If you're not WardyNYM, you were quite literally useless. I'm looking at you, Lindor. I'm looking at you, JDM. I'm looking at you, Alonso. The big boppers on the lineup are doing anything but bop. And I also have a slight gripe that I would just like to share to a degree with Carlos Mendoza, because I was not happy with the start of today's lineup. Francisco Alvarez went 0 for 5 yesterday. I understand him getting the off day today. Luis Torrens carried his own. I know he didn't have much on the offensive end, but he was fantastic defensively, throwing out runners again that we're going to get into as we break down the game inning by inning here shortly, folks. But when you have Ben Gamble starting in the corner outfield over Tyrone Taylor, it just made very little sense to me. I understand maybe you want to give the guy an off day, but Taylor just started getting daily reps now more consistently with Starling Marte on the shelf for at least the next month, and Taylor has been performing rather well. And for a Carlos Mendoza to just bring in Tyrone Taylor after the Mets are already, down in this ball game as we enter the 3rd or 4th inning, it's just silly when they could have again started the game how it should have been with Tyrone in said position. Again, just little things I'm being nitpicky about, especially after a loss. No less, we have play to break down as we always do. We're going to talk about our amazing sponsor at BetUS here shortly. But before we get into it all, everybody, I want to see your initial reactions on the live show here watching live. If you're watching on the replay, let me know in the comments down below, what is your biggest takeaway after this beyond frustrating series defeat here to the Houston Astros, a team where, again, both teams are right around 500 entering this matchup. The Mets had a chance to really pounce after getting above 500 after their Game 1 victory in this series. And since then, they have, of course, plummeted. They lost yesterday when the game was firmly in their grasp for a victory. And today, similar applies. Not a game where they look great, but a game where the Mets easily could have won this ball game. And they just had the bats going a little bit more outside of Brandon and a bullpen having competence. I understand the latter is a very hard thing to do with the way this team's been depleted on the pitching front. But still, I would have loved a victory, would have loved a series victory. And instead, the Mets go from being up a game above 500 to now 24, 48 hours later, they are now a game below 500, at least 2 games out of a wild card spot, and have a massive series against a team right at them in the division right now, and the Washington Nationals kicking off tomorrow. See a bunch of donations I'm going to get to here in a second Ballgame. Thank you all so much for them. I appreciate everyone that took the time here for being here for the third consecutive time watching live. For my replay viewers, I know it matters to absolutely none of you. Just bear with me 1 second, folks, as I make sure that we're properly live and set up here on Twitter as well. If you guys are watching live on Twitter, happy to have you all in here. Make sure that like, that follow button, that retweet button. But no, as always, I will only be interacting in the live chat with our amazing loyal live viewers here on YouTube. And thank you so much in advance for understanding. So make sure that subscribe on YouTube. Help us get at 30K subs. If you haven't already, we're doing a big push. We have an amazing month of July coming in coverage between trade deadline, draft, nightly, of course, coverage on the post-game shows as we always do, everything in between. And folks, I will wrap up today's live show with a prospect report as we will do our daily WardyNYM Mets farm report. Who stood out in the Mets minor leagues between AA, single A, triple A, all that and then some is what we will break down in today's live show too. So sit back, relax, get those fingers ready to start typing in the live chat in the comments down below. The same applies, and let's talk about this ball game. There are a couple things I would just like to share before I get on to other donations. I break down the ballgame inning by inning because I did receive donations from our live show in which we, of course, had to put those private because they only lasted a couple minutes as my stream was lagging like the absolute mofo that it was, unfortunately. We're almost at 100 live viewers here on YouTube. Again, thank you all so much for taking the time. Greatly appreciate it. I also realized that I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that after a certain amount of times coming out with content in one span of 24 hours, YouTube doesn't notify the subscribers after, say, 3 or 4 times. So if we're lower in viewership, along with, of course, this just being a frustrating loss, I'm sure that'll be in hand as to why, too. So apologies in advance for my viewers here that maybe want a little bit more interaction than what we're getting in the live show at the moment. Let's see, though. Blanco did donate earlier, and he said, congrats on the baby, bro. And if you're Stearns, who would you get rid of? Is there anybody that you can help the pitching out there? Great questions, and to simply answer this, first, thank you so much for the donation, Blanco. Greatly appreciate you, my man. So to kick things off, let's get into this. So briefly, who would I get rid of if I'm David Stearns? There's definitely a couple guys I'm willing to sell by the deadline. Should the Mets be in position to both buy and sell, where David Stearns a couple days ago was reiterating exactly that, the Mets have an abundance of pitching and an abundance of a lot of mid-tier options. And while they may be seeking help from, say, Eric Fetty from the Chicago White Sox, shooting for the stars, if you're going to give up the farm, enter Garrett Crochet. If you're looking for a guy where you're going to give up some key assets, but not nearly as much as Garrett Crochet per se, or not as much in general, then you go to the Miami Marlins and say, hey, Peter Bendix, first-time GM of the Marlins, we know we got no bad blood with you. Let's do some deal in the division. Let's bring in Jesus Luzardo, who's having a wishy-washy year with team control. Let's bring him on as a southpaw that can impact the Mets beyond the 2024 season. There are external options for the Mets on the starting pitching front, but before we get there, they will probably part ways with 1 or 2 starters, with Jose Quintana looking right in the thick of things as a rental arm that the Mets may part with. Then you're looking at also whether it's going to be one of Tyler McGill or David Pearson. Both those guys are susceptible of being traded as they are still younger arms with control on their side. Tyler McGill still has at least one more minor league option left. David Pearson, of course, has been up and down so far this year, but not terrible by any stretch. The Mets have options, and when you have guys like Kristen Scott, Jose Buto, and most importantly, Kodai Senga coming back from injury, and then the other two just in the minor leagues, you know the Mets are going to be changing up this rotation quite a bit. Just a month from now, I think it's going to look a bit different than what it currently does, because this Mets team right now will get absolutely nowhere this season with their rotation configuration staying put as is right now, with no length outside of Luis Severino going 7 strong today for the most part, and with no help on the bullpen end when this team desperately needs it, being down multiple arms with injury, and your elite all-star closer currently out on a 10-game suspension that he's serving. Not ideal in Mets land, but again, I appreciate that donation, Blanco. Thank you so much. Our second comment that I want to address before we break down the ball game here, and I'll get to your other donations, folks. Steve Lawn, great member. Thank you so much for the dono, Steve. I still have yet to go to the P.O. box. That applies to both you, Steve, and Dave watching this. Thank you guys so much. Cannot wait to see what you have there. And Steve says with a $5 donation, the next 18 games will come against the Nationals, Pirates, Rockies, and Marlins. 4 teams that are combined 59 games below 500. They'll be fine. Again, don't jinx it. We're knocking on wood. That is a recipe for disaster to say they're fine. I love you, Steve, but we should know better as Mets fans to know that that isn't going to happen. We are not going to necessarily be fine because we have a favorable schedule. Us Mets fans know very well, going back to the 2022 season, the first time they had the most favorable schedule in Major League Baseball, they were like a game or two above 500 that month, barely staying afloat as they unfortunately then faltered down the stretch for first in the division, and the rest is history. That shit show you call a wild card, Max Scherzer max my ass against the San Diego Padres. So, yes, the Mets have a very favorable schedule for their next 18 games. From here on out until they reach the All-Star break, the Mets have one of the most favorable schedules in all Major League Baseball. Post-All-Star break, they also have a very favorable schedule on paper. It doesn't mean anything is guaranteed. We have seen this time and time again with this Mets team. I don't care how many games they won in a row. I don't care how dominant of a joyful June that they had. Grimace is on the side of the road dead. He is washed up. The Grimace era has sadly come to an end, obviously. We saw a rally parakeet at Citi Field, which is a wild whole thing. Remember the parakeet that we saw back, we're looking all the way in 2015 with Yoenis Cespedes, La Potencia, wearing that bright, that bright sleeve, of course, of that highlighter yellow or green, whatever you want to call it, because there was a little parakeet at Citi Field. Fast forward 9 years later, there was a blue parakeet at Citi Field today. It was found by its owner, and they weren't even at the Mets game. It literally flew from wherever they lived in the area, got all the way into the Citi Field Stadium. It was a crazy story today. I was going to label him the rally parakeet, but they lost today, so we don't need to do the rally parakeet, nor do we need to do Grimace. We need to get something else going. I don't know what it is, but it starts by simply winning ball games and not losing them embarrassingly the way they did yesterday, up 5 runs, and today, again, had no offense. The Mets didn't have a single hit until we got into the 6th inning, folks. So again, this was not a game that heading in that they were looking sharp all that might, for all that matter, but still, this is a Mets team that's hopefully looking again for a big series victory that will begin, hopefully, again, fingers crossed, 2 days from now after they take the first 2 in DC. But simply put, to answer that comment from earlier, no, I do not think we should just view this stretch as a cakewalk for the Mets. Schedule-wise, they just need to make sure that they win more often than not. They got to win these series. They got to win them consistently. I'm not expecting to sweep everyone. You got 18 games where they're all favorable games. The Mets, throughout this stretch, I would absolutely love to see them go above 500 naturally. I would love to see them, at absolute worst, go like 10-8. I would love to see them hopefully go above that. If the Mets can somehow, win anywhere, if the Mets can win 12 out of the next 18 games, I'll be ecstatic, right? I think we all will. And that's, fingers crossed, hopefully we can have something along those lines happening. But simply put, again, yes, they have a favorable schedule, but does not mean it's a guarantee to have immediate success. I hope they show that. I hope they prove it. They've been riding high what was a joyful June, but we got to hope that a joyful June transitions into a joyful July and not, what is a negative word that starts with J that isn't anything offensive that we could use as wordplay with July that's the opposite of joyful? Let me know. If we can find that, we'll discuss that here in the chat in a second. AZ, thank you so much for the $10 donation. I appreciate that. David says Festus from Staten Island. Yep, I do know that. I also know he grew up a diehard Yankees fan. Fitting that the diehard Yanks fan gets his tits slit in his Mets debut here. It is what it is. AZ with the $10 donation says, we have a lot of issues with the bullpen, and the offense was sluggish, but we have plenty of season left, and we got the trade deadline to fix the bullpen and get another rotation arm. Calm down, guys. I don't think anyone's overly, concerned about the Mets right now, as we just want immediate solutions, especially to the bullpen front, because we know David Stearns can tap into some external options that aren't going to cost him an arm and a leg, but he naturally, as every GM would, is seeking internal help first before seeking external. Mainly when you have guys like Rudy Garrett, Danilo Nunez, Danny Young have their stretches of brilliance the way that they've had this season. That is why you seek in-house options first and see what your internal talent is in AA and AAA before making those external moves. The problem, the Mets have done that. It isn't working. I think that ship has essentially sailed now. When these guys are kind of helping single-handedly costing you ball games, that's a problem. And there's no denying that if Matt Festa isn't pitching that 11th inning, yes, the Mets may very well still lose this ball game, but they probably don't lose in the manner in the way that they did, right? So just some food for thought there. Great question, great comments. Thank you so much for that, AZ. We see Cameron with a $5 donation in the chat says, putrid, pathetic, feeble. You might as well think he's Frank the Tank with those words. Those are the only 3 words I can come up with. Yep, very frustrating series. Appreciate the donation, Cameron. Yes, it was frustrating, it was feeble, and it was pathetic. And look, the offense, even in a day where they didn't have much offense to work with outside of Brandon Nimmo, the Mets still put up 5 runs. So they're leading the way in June, of course, with over 6.5 runs average per game. That held true all month long. Insane. Great run by the Mets here. But now as we enter July, it's a whole new ball game, right? It's an entire new ball game. And it's a reset button, if you will. So this Mets team, again, they need to fine-tune some things. They need to ground themselves. They just need to make sure that this 2-game losing skid doesn't become a 3, 4, 5-game losing skid. This has been a problem for the Mets earlier this season. We got to make sure that that changes, obviously. And I do just realize that I'm so sorry to each and every one of you. Am I running the proper highlights from today's game, or am I going, wow, that's how lost I am. The Jose Altuve being thrown out of the game, that happened today. I honestly forgot for a minute because of the rain delay. I think that had to have been. The rain delay of roughly 3 hours is what cooked me, because I'm seeing Altuve freaking out, arguing, of course, Altuve was thrown out earlier in the game because he argued that a ball, he fouled off a ball, hit him on the foot. When it didn't hit him on the foot, it wasn't clear at least, and it was a non-reviewable play, and that's it. Scott with the $5 donation, thank you so much. Scott says, gonna pull I want to say Favre. I don't know. I can't pronounce that properly. I apologize, Scott. And double down for you and your baby. If you asked us June 1st, would we be happy being 1 game under 500 July 1st? We all say yes. That is 100% true. That is true. And it's a 4-game set against the Nationals. If that's the truth, that's exciting. That's going to be a huge matchup then. My apologies if I misspoke there, folks. I'm really excited for that, that in-house, that rivalry matchup between these two teams in the NL East. Scott, thank you for that donation. I greatly appreciate that as always. And yeah, no, I think every Mets fan would agree that they would be ecstatic if they heard a month ago that they would be in a position where they are going to be a game below 500. Would I love if the Mets were 500 above 500 like they were just the past couple of days? Absolutely. But yes, the sky is not falling. We just got to make sure this Mets team gets themselves grounded and gets back in a groove of things as soon as humanly possible. Dave with the $2 donation. Thank you, Dave. Dave says, when they didn't win in the 10th, I knew it was over. Yep, I had a feeling it wasn't going to be good either. There were multiple points in this game where I didn't expect the Mets to win, yet they were still clawing back because of Brandon Nimmo. And let's talk about Brandon Nimmo now. JD Martinez was absolutely killer that we saw in the 10th. Of course, he struck out, which was a brutal strikeout. We need to move that runner over there to third base. We couldn't do that. JDM, one of those rare putrid offensive days, but if anyone gets a pass, it starts with guys like JDM to a degree, obviously. Without him, the Mets would not be where they are right now this season offensively. The hottest offense in baseball overall the past month. JD Martinez even had Brandon Nimmo pregame today working on, aspects of his swing, stuff that he helped him out with. Same way that we saw JDM help implement to Mets hitters that we saw in BP yesterday, according to Steve Galvis of SNY. The Mets, of course, or Gary Cohen rather, that the Mets were batting with metal bats, but weighted metal bats in BP to help them. And that has been helping them, according to what recent reports have suggested. So JD Martinez, who essentially has adopted the hitting coach role, because Eric Chavez and Danny Barnes are just about as useful as what this Mets bullpen was today, so very little. And when you look at a veteran hitter, a hitting savant in JD Martinez, having World Series success the way he has, being over 300 career home run hitter already, a future Hall of Famer, you're going to take, some of his advice to a degree, and for good reason, folks. And that is exactly what the Mets were able to do with JD Martinez thus far. But unfortunately for them and JD Martinez, they just were not able to get the JD that they were hoping for in this matchup. And the same applied with Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso, to a degree, among others. And that's what we got to say about that. But all right, guys, let's see here. And again, I just want to, I honestly feel like I'm losing my mind at the moment. Jose Altuve was thrown out of today's game, correct? Okay. Yes, it was, because Brandon Nimmo hit the bomb thereafter. Okay, just making sure. Cameron with the $2 donation. Thank you, Cameron. Cameron says, Frank throughout the first pitch in Arizona today. Correct. Frank is going to continue throughout the first pitch in every other ballpark, not named the Mets, because every other team that isn't the Mets loves Frank, because they love seeing him react ridiculously to the Mets, because the Mets are a continued laughingstock to many, and Frank continues to put that on a pedestal, and that is how he makes his money. With the Mets doing well, that's why you're not going to hear him talk much, because that means he in his pockets is not doing as well as he would have hoped. Yes, he's on salary with Barstool Sports. Yes, he's absolutely incentivized to have the reactions that he does. Anyone that thinks otherwise doesn't understand how sports and kind of being a talking head and being an influencer, if you will, works. Don't get me started on Frank. It just terrible excuse of a fan for this organization. Might be a diehard, but far from one that I would call genuine to a degree. He's genuine in his fandom. He is not genuine, however, in all of his reactions. Especially, there's a reason why he shuts up when the Mets do well. And even when the Mets do well, he still tries to pull teeth and find a way. As I'm sure he rants his head off, as he always going to do, nibble on that little thing he has around his neck, as the incompetent man that he is. Claire, of course, says, says, Wardy, I know who you want us to get, but I want you to tell us who you would dump. When it comes to dumping players, of course, Jeff McNeil is in that category, obviously. It also looks at Jose Quintana. It looks at one of Sean Manaea, Tyler McGill, David Pearson, one of those guys I could see being considered parted with. And prior to Starling Marte's injury, one of the outfielders I think could have been had if the Mets were trying to seek either better help in those areas or seeking more immediate help in other areas where it made sense. Again, I'm not too stubborn on wanting guys immediately off this team, but there are a couple that headline, and I'd be lying if I didn't say that Jeff falls in that category because of how underwhelming he has been for a guy that's making a lot more money than he should be getting right now, as playing as a contact hitter for a guy that outside of his last game has been absolutely useless for the vast majority of the season and basically the vast majority of the 2023 season too. The rain delay, yes, was roughly 3 hours. It was ridiculous, and that's why we're talking this late here for the live show, folks. But all right, everybody, I greatly appreciate everyone taking the time to chime in. We might be a reality once again, having such lagging issues, but we have, unfortunately. Yes, I know we froze again, everybody, and I do apologize about that. Issue like this in over a month, so it's very annoying. Okay, we're rolling. All right, we're going to try to break down this ball game now. It says the stream's current bit rate is lower than the recommended bit rate. I'm aware of that. I know. Okay, let's talk about this ball game. Let's get into it. We're going to rapid fire to try to break down this one, innings 1 through 9, the best way we can. Just give me 1 second before we do exactly that, folks. Oh, I closed a bunch of tabs. That's the more frustrating thing, David. I closed like 6 tabs. I literally did. So it's not like I didn't do that because I thought that was the culprit because I've had issues with that in the past. Apparently not the case. I think the computer's just running hot. It's been a long day. And of course, this rain delay certainly didn't help anything either. But all right, folks, we're just going to break down the game, the key takeaways from this ball game. Let's do that, and we'll go from there. So we'll go through everything. Again, we got Luis Severino on the bump today against Dubin. Dubin, who again had a just under 6 ERA or so entering this matchup against the Metsies in this one, did not fare well whatsoever. Did not fare well entering today's game. However, in today's game, he went over 3 strong innings. And again, guys, please let me know, be honest in the chat, if it feels like the stream is way too delayed, if we are unfortunately really having a problem, let me know. I understand. If it's something where we just can't do it today, then we can't do it today. Not the end of the world, but again, we can roll back and do this again tomorrow for tomorrow's post game, as we always do. I hate to be the type to end a show early. I don't want that to happen, but it's looking more closer and closer that way at the moment. Let's see here. All right, guys, we're going to rapid fire this one. Starts off in the first. Jose Altuve, before getting thrown out, rips himself a single. Afterwards, that's all she wrote. In the bottom of the first, the Mets get a walk from Brandon Nimmo. Again, Brandon would be the saving grace on the offensive end, but nothing else to show for this Mets team for the most part. Then we see here in the second inning that we get nothing outside of a John Singleton home run. He rips one and barrels one to right, and Singleton, with his 6th home run this season, makes it a 1-0 Astros lead. Unfortunately, a little bit of a hanger there by Sevy. That was all eaten up that we saw by Mr. John Singleton, makes it a 1-0 ball game. As we then continue to break this one down, folks, we get to the bottom of the second. DJ Stewart will do nothing. Ben Gamble gets on with a walk. And if I didn't mention that already in our third attempt of doing a live show here, I'll say it again. Ben Gamble is someone who I absolutely wanted to not start today, and I simply do not understand the thought of starting him just to pull him 3 or 4 innings in this one for Tyrone Taylor. It just doesn't make sense to me, and you have to wonder if there would be any difference in the initial offensive approach if Taylor started this game versus, of course, coming in as a pinch hitter and then first pitch swinging, a brutal first pitch swinging, unfortunately, which ended the inning where the Mets were trying to pounce there. Gamble to walk, that's all she wrote. We then advance to the bottom of the third because Luis Severino works a 1-2-3, but so does Dubin. He works a 1-2-3 himself. We then get to the fourth where Alex Bregman rips his 16th double of the year. A Yordan Alvarez walk later, and Yainer Diaz drives in the second run of the day for Houston. Makes it a 2-0 lead thanks to an RBI single. 3-0 after Jake Myers would ground out. Again, it's just with 1 out, it's an Astros 3-0 lead, and Sevy gets out of the jam there afterwards. But again, it's 3-0 that we see in the Houston Astros' favor. We then get to the fourth. How you doing, Priest? Happy to have you in here. Shout out all my great members, Steve, Steven, Carlos, everybody, and your mother first chiming in live in a replay. Thank you so much for that. Greatly appreciate every single one. Be able to rally back. They would rally back, but they would also fall short. And we would see there in the top of the six, the Mets do nothing. The Astros do nothing, rather. It's a 3-0 ball game as we then advance to the bottom of the sixth, where we would see WardyNYM finally get the Mets' first hit of the day. And the Mets get their first hit of the day with a single from Mr. Brandon. In the sixth, JD Martinez will then strike out after Pete Alonso with one out rips his 20th double of the season, a line drive that we see to right field, and that makes it two guys in scoring position for the Metsies. What do they do with two outs? Mark Vientos steps the hell up, and that is one man that I meant to make mention of earlier if I didn't already. Mets loss, and Mark Vientos again, though, continues to do fantastic things with the bat. Vientos hit the bomb yesterday, the day before. I got them confused. It was a long weekend on my own, especially being a new father. We got a lot going on right now. Vientos, though, makes it a 4-2 Metropolitan deficit as he would rip a double down the third baseline, which would be amazing that we saw driving in those runs. Mets only down by a couple, so they finally get some offense after the starters taken out of the game. They're finally starting to feel somewhat confident in their ability to rally back in said ball game. And as we see that in the top of the seventh, we would see Singleton rip a single. We would see Trey Cabbage rip a double, but that's all she wrote. Luis Severino would finish with a final line as follows, folks. 7 innings of 8 hit, 4 earned run, 1 walk, 3 strikeout ball. Everybody, let me know your thoughts in the chat for my live viewers here on Twitter. How you doing? If you're watching live on YouTube, how you doing? Let us know in the comments down below and in the live chat, where would you have your rating for Luis Severino and his start today on a scale of 1 to 10. I will share mine shortly. Once again, it's the pitching report after we break down the ballgame inning by inning. But I definitely want to hear from you, amazing Mets fans, where you stand 1 out of 10. Where would you have Luis Severino and 7 innings of 4 earned run ball? The Mets have only hit the 7th inning mark with their starters around 7 times this season, and at least 7 or 9, one of the two. But 4 of those times have come courtesy of Luis Severino, who's been an absolute dog for them. Absolutely. But to get back in this one, breaking down the ball game, folks, again, the Mets are only down by a pair. We get the bottom of the 7th. Luis Torrens gets just miss a home run to tie the ball game. His 13th of the year, rips one oppo. He's repping the OMG sign, which I know a follower of mine actually made that sign for the boys at Citi Field. So shout out to them. Mets have this ball game tied 4-4. We're feeling electric. This is starting to feel like another amazing victory where they're coming back and they're rallying. Unfortunately, they will again fall short. And yes, I did probably freeze everybody. It has been freezing on and off. This is our 3rd attempt of doing the live show today. So if it isn't the prettiest show, that is exactly why, beyond my face. So I apologize to each and every one of you if there is any persistent lagging or just any freezing of stretches of time. I don't mean that to be the case, unfortunately. Just having a bad day with the connection. But we should be back going without a problem tomorrow. I think I know exactly the reason why. It was 1, I didn't have the proper Wi-Fi on initially. 2, I was running a boatload of tabs at once. And 3, and most importantly, I had my software open that I usually don't have open when I'm not actively working in it, open for the entire rain delay. So I think that cooked me as well. It is what it is. We then get to the top of the 8th, everybody. We'd see Yainer Diaz with a 2-out double, but nothing else transpires there. And that, of course, is as Adrian Hauser comes in for beautiful relief, pitching 2 scoreless innings for the Amazons yet again today. Awesome as a reliever, terrible as a starter, but that's okay. You can be our new Trevor Williams, Adrian. I'm not going to complain there. Mets do nothing in the bottom of the 8th offensively, unfortunately. And as we get to the top of the 9th, mind you, of course, this is getting closer to the rain delay, folks. John Singleton singles, and this is a 4-4 ball game there that we know. Nothing else really transpires. We get to the bottom of the 9th. A huge rain delay of roughly 3 hours happens. So in the bottom of the 9th, we see, instead of Josh Hader coming in to pitch, who was warming up and was about, of course, to toe the rubber there in the 9th, because of that rain delay, they offer Taylor Scott, and thankfully they did, because the Mets would pounce and take advantage. Mind you, one thing that I would like to emphasize I didn't discuss much throughout this game is that Luis Torrens threw out not 1 but 2 runners trying to steal second base. Torrens, as the backup catcher, already light years, I think, on what you would be getting over, say, Tomas Nido, for example. Just fantastic stuff there by Torrens. Both offensively didn't have much to show today, but defensively he's just been tremendous. And to throw out not 1 but 2 runners when teams have been stealing against the Mets as consistently as they've been this season, absolutely huge. No less, though, Torrens unfortunately couldn't get anything going there. We head to extras as this ball game again is tied 4-4. Adam Ottavino would give up a single to Chas McCormick because, of course, he does there in extras with 1 out. Makes it a 5-4 Astros in. Folks, you see the trend? And we're lagging in you to talk. Was the Mets' first run scored? was the game-tying home run and was the game-tying double that we saw. Absolutely massive outing by Brandon Nimmo today. The Mets would be nowhere on the offensive end without him whatsoever. So we see Brandon Nimmo again ties the ball game with the double. However, the Mets, they get a strikeout by JD Martinez, a brutal strikeout. All pitches in the zone he should be hitting. Just could not see Taylor Scott well. Then Pete Alonso is intentionally walked that we see there for Pete Alonso. And then unfortunately, Harrison Bader grounds out. Can't have that clutch gene that we've seen playing this season. And Mark Vientos grounds out. So the Mets, again, had an ability to pounce, had an ability to walk this one off. They were not able to do it, unfortunately, and they would go on to, again, lose this ball game by a final score of 10-5, because in the 11th, Matt Festa, again, who the recent call-up, the Staten Island native, of course, went to East Stroudsburg University, which is like 40-45 minutes away from me. It's not even far here as I reside in Pennsylvania. I know that school pretty well, and we see Matt Festa get his absolute tit slit. He intentionally walks Yordan Alvarez. Again, your runners at second and first, not looking good. Yerner Diaz ties the ball game 5-5 with a single. Jake Myers gives them the 6-5 lead with a single. Still no outs. Still no outs for Joey Loperfido, who came in as a pinch runner later in the ball game for Singleton. He makes it 8-5. Love the name by Joey, though. Seriously, my goodness. Love that. Then it becomes 10-5 after a double by Trey Cabbage. Again, a bunch of guys you don't know. And the Mets go on to lose this one by a final score of 10-5. They just didn't have it today, folks. And I apologize again for the lagging. I know that has been frustrating to say the least. But let's talk about what's also been frustrating. It has, of course, been this Mets offense. We know that it has been a thorn. Pardon me, what am I saying with the offense? It has been, obviously, on the pitching end with the bullpen being as taxed as it's been. Yes, did JD Martinez striking out there in that situation hurt the Mets? Of course it did. There's no way that it didn't. But at the same time, this is still a Mets team that needed their bullpen to be more than what they currently are. When you're as depleted as the Mets bullpen is right now, when you are as gassed as they've been, and when you're down, again, a full-on pitcher the way that the Mets are in their pen, where they can't replace that pitcher with Edwin Diaz being out, you have yourself a bit of a problem. So the bullpen being taxed certainly did not help the Mets whatsoever, but this is also a Mets team that in certain ways definitely deserved to lose the ball game. Yesterday, they had that game in their grasp and they just floundered and they let it lose. That one hurt a lot. Today was more frustrating because this was a game that while they didn't have a lot going, they had the clutch gene in them. Brandon Nimmo, Mark Vientos doing everything that they possibly could, but no one else was really able to step up to the plate in a day where you needed another big hit by Francisco Lindor, JD Martinez, just to carry their weight. You know, just give us a 1 or 2 hit game where you're providing with runners in scoring position. The Mets simply were not able to get that, unfortunately, and again, that's what led them also to their loss. A combination of the offense not clutching up when we needed to, paired with a pitching staff on the bullpen front, which is also labored, and we find ourselves down a series as always, and now, unfortunately, down a game below 500. But I'm not going to sit here and complain too much. The Mets had a fantastic month of June. There's a lot of things I greatly appreciate that they had the past month. I don't, however, appreciate the Mets in this series, a series that they absolutely should have won. That's the one that stings a bit more. You know, even with every series until the All-Star break, they should win on paper. Yes, that's true. So we're going to continue to say that. For the games they field, the Mets win a very dramatic, a fun Game 1 at Citi Field. Jose Iglesias is performing, and everything goes downhill afterwards. So hopefully, similar to the Edwin Diaz and having Timmy Trumpet at Citi Field, we don't have that same kind of bad luck where fans are initially thinking this led to this right after. No, that is not the case here. Let's see. I also do realize that for the stats on the graphic, I realize at the bottom are the stats from yesterday. So I apologize about that as well, everybody. That are all numbers from yesterday. That's why it still says Grody and Mays for the patches. Again, I'm all over the place. I had the stream set up, guys. I waited very long. I was busy with family today too, and I took time away from them to have everything set up today. And even went on my way to do all this, my stream just gave me a serious problem today. Now we have some graphic issues. So I do apologize about that. Just one of those. The Mets are a mess today, the same way I'm a mess. But we will all be back right in sync tomorrow as if this never happened, right? And before we get on to the pitching, because I got a bit to say on the pitching and the offensive end, before we wrap up the show, folks, I do have to let you all know about our amazing sponsor on the channel, as always, and that is, of course, our great friends at BetUS. Because in case you guys and gals do not know BetUS, listen up. You got to listen today because BetUS has you covered with all your sports betting needs, and we are doing awesome stuff with them. We've been doing fantastic giveaways. We just did a Mets jersey giveaway with them. We're going to be doing more in the future with them as well. So here is a word from our great friends at BetUS.
BetUS, America's favorite sportsbook and casino. Live betting and racebook. We're celebrating 30 years with a historic offer. A 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits. Plus 10% gambler's insurance. Get started today. BetUS, where the game begins.
All right, folks, if there's one thing I can say, I really hope you tailed my UFC 303 picks. That's all I got to say. Yesterday, UFC 303 transpired, and we share, of course, daily betting picks on the channel that you guys can tail should you wish with our amazing sponsor by clicking the link down below. That way, you two get 125% that we will today. But yesterday was Prohaska that happened in dramatic fashion with a leg kick to the head to begin the second round yesterday. Absolutely nuts. Diego Lopez, I had over Brian Ortega, but Brian Ortega had to be out of the fight, actually, with a fever. Again, these guys took the fight on 2 weeks rest, 2 weeks notice, the same as Yuri and Alex, as they were trying to save this card as Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler fell through as Conor unfortunately broke his pinky toe. So the long-awaited return there for Conor will continue to be long-awaited. But Pereira did what he needed to do. That we know Diego Lopez was supposed to fight Brian Ortega. First, the fight was supposed to be at 145. Then it got pushed to 155 because Ortega couldn't make weight any lower than that. And then Ortega was deathly ill basically the day of the fight yesterday. So Dan Ige on 4 hours notice took the fight. So if you guys saw Diego Lopez winning the fight regardless of who he was fighting, awesome job. I did so as well. So good. Again, congratulations to everybody that hammered those 2 legs of a parlay and came out with some winnings yesterday. Again, Lopez did awesome, but to see Dan Ige step up in that fight too was huge on 4 hours notice. I'm president, never happened in UFC history, and he even won the 3rd round. That is how much of a banger that card was yesterday. A lot of knockouts. The prelim fights were awesome too. A lot of great fights on UFC 303, all things considered, yesterday. But if you weren't tailing those picks, you might want to tail our picks starting tomorrow. And we're going to have some exciting matchups, obviously. Not a lot of slate of games tomorrow, actually. This Monday, we have the Brewers, the Rockies, the Astros, the Blue Jays, and the Nationals, Mets. So this is an interesting one. And the Blue Jays have been underwhelming all season, and because of that reason, I'm not going to hammer them here. The Astros, though, I do like the Astros. The only thing I don't like is the travel aspect right now, but the Rockies, Brewers, obviously like the Rockies a lot in this matchup, so I'm going to take the Rockies outright. And you know what? The Mets are just the money line favorite tomorrow. I don't love them just being the money line favorite, but again, I do have faith in my Metsies here, so if I'm going to bet on the Mets, I'm going to definitely bet on the Mets over this Astros-Jays game, because that's a huge toss-up. We're going to go Metsies here. We're going to go money line for them to win outright. Again, bet responsibly should you guys do it. I don't bet on the Mets too much. I barely bet on them throughout their streak of just doing fantastic. 12-3 earlier this year, and then what we saw this past month. But we're going to bet on them here, and it is 10 to win $22.07 on the 2-leg parlay. So again, bet responsibly, but make sure you're betting with our great friends at BetUS, and thank you all so much in advance for doing so. But let's reel in. Let's talk about the pitching and what certainly stood out, both great or maybe not so great on the bullpen front. Solo with the $5 donation says, I love Iglesias, but if the Mets start to slump again, I'm paralleling this to the live Narco performances. Yep, I don't blame you at all. I know fans are going to do that. It is what it is. It's going to happen. I understand. Frustrating worry, but we're missing half a bullpen. I know we are, Todd, and that's why I'm not screaming my head off. Just unfortunate. Again, we need reinforcements. We know that. We need to get right back on our feet. We know that. Don't forget about the prospect report, please. Anthony, thank you for reminding me, because I probably would have otherwise, because I did that once already a couple days ago. Try not to, but when you rant for like roughly an hour the way that I do and ramble at times, you might lose your train of thought. But on the pitching end, folks, let's take a look at what has stood out. And this all comes, a lot of it, courtesy of my great friend and pitching contributor on the channel. When I mean pitching contributor, my man Isaac Groffman. Check him out on Twitter at ISAACGROFFMAN on Twitter X for pitching threads of different Mets pitchers, prospect standouts, current performance of players, and even some draft stuff going on too. Check out his Twitter. He does fantastic work. But Isaac, a diehard young Mets fan, loves to relay information to me after each game. Basically gives me a nice little report on what stood out with Severino's arsenal and some notes on the bullpen, headlined by Adrian Hauser, obviously, that go beyond the eye test. And a lot of this information comes courtesy of Baseball Savant, among others, to just give you guys an idea of why Sevy was working the way he was today. Let's break it down. And it starts with his sinker at 63% of the time today. He was sitting right around 95, topped out 97.6, so rounded out to 98. The four-seam fastball that we see was 14% of his arsenal at 96 miles per hour, topped out at 98. The changeup at 8% of the arsenal, 86 miles per hour. Sweeper at 5% of the arsenal at 86 miles per hour. Slider at 5% of the arsenal at 87 miles per hour. And the cutter at 5% at 94 miles per hour. Sevy was able to utilize his sinker a lot this year, but today he used it more than ever before. And including his four-seam and cutter, he threw fastballs, actually, but today he used it more than ever before, including his four-seam and cutter. He threw fastballs 82% of the time today. Whopping fastball usage by Sevy. You know, he did get soft contact. He induced a bit. The problem was the defense that he had some issues that we saw, and that soft contact unfortunately ended up hurting him as things were falling. The velo on that four-seam fastball was up, and it had a 25% whiff rate on it, and it did have a strikeout on said pitch, where Sevy, again, only had 3 Ks on the day. The problem was that we saw there is that he had none of his secondary pitches working. He established his sweeper as a K pitch in his last start, but was not able to utilize it whatsoever today. That sweeper did not have the swing and miss he was looking for, nor did he really have the proper control and fit for it. You know, when you throw 98 like Severino, he does this quite a bit, as we know. It is not a bad idea to throw your fastball all the time, but it comes down with risk of course, soft contact dropping, and that was unfortunately full-fledged today, which is why he gave up some hard contact to guys like Singleton, and unfortunately that plethora of runs where he again is charged with 4 in this one. Overall, Sevy did a strong job by not taxing this Mets bullpen beyond what it's already been taxed. And again, the one thing that we can credit with Luis Severino, even if he hasn't given the Mets as sharp of a start as maybe as what he's hoping for, he has been able 9 out of 10 times to provide the Mets length. And that's something that basically no other Mets starter has done, and that length is so important. My man gives him a 6 out of 10 on the ranking, says Isaac, and I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10 as well. Actually, I'm going to go 6.5 out of 10 for Sevy today, because we need as many innings eaten at a solid quality rate the way that Severino has done. Again, Sevy's not the reason why the Mets lost this game today. If anything, the Mets were able to really rally around him, and, you know, him having some laboring issues early on, and get some great offense headline, and really mainly Brandon Nimmo and Mark Vientos sprinkling in that 2-run double. I will not forget that. That's an important one. But overall, that's what you got from Luis Severino today. So continue to let me know your thoughts about that in the live show in the comments down below, folks. Then we see on the bullpen front, Adrian Hauser has seen a pretty significant velo increase in this role, especially on all 3 pitches, since he moved the bullpen, as you could expect in a limited sample size. Naturally, that velo is going to be fresh and be ready. You know, he was up almost 3 ticks that we saw on the sinker, and is touching 96 pretty regularly, something he hasn't done at all consistently since the 2021 season. So fast forward a couple years later, Adrian Hauser in a reliever role is really thriving with that velocity, is thriving with his pinpoint location that we've seen, and inducing those groundouts. Got to give a huge tip of the cap to Adrian Hauser, who, again, the ERA might not look pretty, but that's all his starter ERA. ERA as a reliever, he has been fantastic. Adrian Hauser, 2 innings of 2 hits, 0 earned run, 0 walk, 1 K ball, 5.37 ERA on the season. Sevy with a 3.42 ERA. Adam Ottavino gave up that unearned run there, and Extras 4.68, and Matt Festa with a 36 ERA, so it can only come down from here, you'd hope. Solo with the $5 donation, thank you so much. He says, I love Jose Iglesias, but if the Mets start to slump again, I'm parallel. Oh, I answered that already. Thank you for that, Solo. I appreciate that. And yes, I don't blame you for feeling that way. I want to see Iglesias get time, and I think Jose's probably going to start at least half the games in that 4-game matchup against the Nationals. Should it be 4 games? I'm going to double check to make sure that it is. I'm pretty sure it is, but I want to make sure for you all that it is before we get on to the offense. Then we'll do prospect report, and then we will wrap up today's show, which has went so much longer than it should have because of the lag issues and, of course, the game. A rain delay of 3 hours. We should have done this show mere hours ago, but weather had other plans, unfortunately. Yep, 4 games set, including an 11 o'clock game on 4th of July. I appreciate it. That's going to be a fun day. Hopefully, an amazing series victory by that point already. If not, hopefully they secure it in that final game of that 4-game set. And now on the offensive end, everybody, let's talk. Not a lot to really get into. Again, Brandon Nimmo stood out huge. I cannot emphasize how fantastic Nimmo was in the 2-hole today. Defensively, offensively, Brandon continues to rake right now, and JD Martinez, among others, have certainly helped him, but JDM's hitting approach has definitely helped the likes of Brandon Nimmo, especially in this 2-hole. Francisco Lindor 0 for 5 today, 248 average, 751 OPS on the season. A rare 0 for as of late for Lindor, who has otherwise been thriving in that leadoff spot, one of the best hitters in Major League Baseball in that spot since starting at it. Brandon Nimmo 3 for 4 today with the home run, the 3 RBIs, the double, 247 average, 815 OPS. The power is really starting to showcase here yet again with Brandon. JD Martinez with an 0 for 4 night, a 277 average, and 836 OPS on the season. Pete Alonso 1 for 3 with a run scored and a pair of walks, a 245 average, and an 807 OPS. DJ Stewart went 0 for, and DJ Stewart unfortunately may have played his way into losing a roster spot. This was a bad day at the plate for DJ. 183 average and a 666 OPS, which is never a good number to have. Harrison Bader 0 for 1 as he came in defensive alignment later on in the ball game. Mark Vientos, of course, with the 2-run double, 295 average, 932 OPS for our third baseman. Ben Gamel, literally Ben Gamel had one at bat, which was a walk. And then Tyrone Taylor came in the game to go 0 for 4 thereafter. 229 average, 647 OPS for Tyrone. Luis Torrens 0 for 4, but did throw out a couple batters, so we appreciate that defense greatly. And Jeff McHits, more like Jeff McNope, not today. 0 for 5 with a pair of strikeouts for Jeff, batting ninth. Not the big 3-hit day we were hoping a couple days ago that we saw. 217 average, 584 OPS on the season. Still a bottom 5 OPS in all Major League Baseball among eligible batters with similar sample sizes. So that's what you got on the offensive end, folks. Again, not a lot to really headline there. Just know that Brandon Nimmo carried the way. Again, Brandon Nimmo in order. First hit up for the Mets today. First run scored for the Mets today. First game-tying home run for the Mets today. And the game-tying double. Literally, the Mets will be nowhere without that man. Insane stuff. Love you, Brandon. Greatly appreciate you. But all right, folks, let's get into talking about the prospects a bit before I wrap things up. And let's start with a guy who hit a scorching 420-foot home run the last time we spoke, which was Luis Angel Acuna, our last postgame coverage that we discussed him. Big bomb. And today, Acuna did have himself at least a hit. And Acuna also had a 109 mile per hour exit velocity opposite field, goes right through the second baseman's glove. Yes, you heard that correctly. The 109 mile per hour exit velocity by Luis Angel Acuna was so significant it went through the actual glove of the opposing infielder there in Syracuse. And as we take a look as a whole today, the Syracuse Mets did lose. They faltered to the Buffalo Bisons 8-2, but Acuna had himself an RBI and a 270 average and a 701 OPS, had a fantastic month of June that we know. Acuna, it's not a matter of if, but when he will be called up by the Mets at some point this season. And then outside of that, we also see what has been going on with other guys, specifically whether it's going to be Brett Beatty, who was 0 for yet again today, 0 for 3, 317, over 1,000 OPS. If he's not hitting bombs, he's doing nothing at the AAA level. But he's been hitting bombs so consistently that it's been okay for Barry Bonds Beatty in there. Outside of that, really nothing else stood out for the Mets on the offensive end for the most part. Blade Tidwell won 4.2 innings of 3 earned run ball, 5 walks, 7 Ks, just allowed 2 hits. So again, that walks are the killer for Blade Tidwell at the AAA level. Still trying to fine-tune his game as a young pro. Was looking great, of course, there in AA, called up to AAA earlier this year. Hasn't had the same amount of success. Still getting adjusted, as we know, with a 5.12 ERA. Again, didn't give up much hits, but a 5-walk outing. Holy shit, you might as well think that this is going to be one of the guys in the Mets rotation right now, because it feels like walks galore is very much up the Mets' alley as they lead the way in walks. Need Pearson to show up tomorrow? We do, because if Pearson doesn't show up, he may have just lost his turn in the order as well. The Mets are going to be cutthroat with their rotation. They have internal options to consider that they should right now in Scott and Butone. I think we're going to see hopefully one of them in this 4-game stretch against the Nationals. And then you're also, with Tyler Miguel being sent down, you're 100% going to see that happen, actually. And then, of course, Kodai Senga when he eventually returns from injury, as Senga will officially begin his rehab assignment middle of the next week is what we're looking at with Senga, who threw another strong bullpen. He's looking locked and loaded and ready to go to finally begin his rehab. Dave, a great member of 20 months, my man. Happy to have you in here. Have grievances on Festivus. DFA him. Yes, the Festivus Festa is likely not going to be with the Mets lawn. Again, this is just a short-term bullpen option, and unfortunately for the Mets, that short-term bullpen option was a short-term terrible option. That's all we got there from the Syracuse Mets, though. So now as we get into our next matchup we have here on the minor league front, we're going to go with the Rummel Ponies, and the Rummel Ponies got absolutely curb stomped today by Portland Sea Dogs by a final score of 9-1. On the offensive end, of course, Rudick in the left field went 2 for 5. Outside of that, though, nothing else to show for it. Ryan Clifford won 1 for 4 today, 178 average at 828 OPS. He is our Kyle Schwarber in the minor leagues. He's our biggest bopper. I'm very excited to see Ryan Clifford at the major league level at some point over the next year. But that's all she wrote. Bryce Montes de Oca had himself another scoreless rehab outing. Guys, if you want bullpen reinforcements, just wait. Bryce Montes de Oca will be with the Mets sooner than later. He continues to look great in rehab. He's touching high 90s on the gun. Was fantastic before dealing with an injury a year ago. He pitched a scoreless outing there in AA today. No hits, no earned runs, no walks, and had a pair of strikeouts. Love that from Montes de Oca, who's continuing to work himself back into this Mets bullpen. But the Mets, otherwise, with the Rummel Ponies, had nothing to show, to say the least. So the Rummel Ponies falter there But a team that doesn't falter is not the Brooklyn Cyclones, as they actually lose this one 11-10 today, and it was a hitting clinic, as Nick Morbido, that we know is a top outfield prospect for the Mets, rising plenty this season. Great play by him. Again, a 2022 draft pick by the Mets in the second round, Morbido. Love the pick then I do right now. A 4 for 5 on the day with a pair of RBIs, a walk, and 2 runs scored, 302 average, and a 772 OPS on the season for Morbido. That really stood out there on the offensive end. Nothing else too notable of prospects that we actually have a certain level of hype with there. And on the pitching end, nothing to talk about whatsoever in a 10-11 ball game. And last but not least here, we are going to get into, that was from the Brooklyn Cyclones, we are going to have a victory from the Port St. Lucie Mets as they took down PMB, who I honestly don't, okay, it's the Cardinals. Okay, must be, okay, that's the Cardinals minor league team. Gotcha. So the Mets here, we got Mercado, 2 for 4. Okay, appreciate that, with a couple RBIs. Nothing, however, from guys like Marco Vargas, who I absolutely love, who's having an underwhelming year in the pros thus far. And that's really all she wrote. Not a lot to love there for the Mets. You did get a nice pitching performance, however, that I will say, from Joel Diaz, who's continuing to stand out there. Definitely solid outing for him today, who went 5.1 innings of 2 hit, 1 earned run ball, three walks, and 2 strikeouts, and a sub-6 ERA on the year as he's still getting his footing down. But this is a Diaz that still has plenty of potential in the Mets organization. Very young there that we see in single A. But folks, that's going to do it for the live show. I want to thank you all so much. I don't understand why you call me priest. I don't know what's going on in the chat right now. But again, I appreciate you all taking the time to watch. As again, the Mets unfortunately faltered tonight by a final score of 10-5. That was the nightly WardyNYM Farm Report, going over the box scores and what stood out maybe versus what didn't. And for the Mets here, simply put, shore up this bullpen. We need reinforcements. We need them fast. We need more of them. As Matt Festa, unfortunately, is not going to get the job done, at least not right away. What was a putrid outing. This offense, again, if you're not named Brandon Nimmo, I expect you to step up in this 4-game set starting tomorrow against the Washington Nationals. If the Mets win 3 out of 4 against DC, they are in perfect position for them to then ride in for their future series before they get to the All-Star break. This is such a pivotal matchup between the two teams right now. It's not that standings watch means much right now, but for a Mets team that went from 11 games below 500 to looking like the season was over, to now just a game below 500 again after getting above 500, you like the Mets' chances of being right in the thick of things for playoffs here. And the Mets right now have themselves 2 games up on the Washington Nationals. So if the Mets lose this series, that's bad, because of course the Nats gain all that ground. And we're up again 40-41 on the season. The Nats are 39-44. The Mets win 3 out of 4. They can really start to try to put a nail in the coffin, at least for the interim, against the Nationals, should the Nats not rally all the way back the way that the Mets did, down 11 games below 500 this season. Gotta pounce on them. Big series starting tomorrow. Very excited to see how this one is going to turn out, everybody. You just gotta hope that we have a better turnout than what we had for a very frustrating Astros series in the past 24 to 48 hours. Do I like the Mets tomorrow? I do, but I don't love them. If you're gonna bet responsibly with our great friends at BetUS. But if you're gonna hammer money line, just do it cautiously. That's what I will say. There's not many slates of games tomorrow, but the Mets against the Nationals, I do like that matchup. I just don't love it yet. I don't love it because of these back-to-back losses. And again, just when you think you have a victory in your grasp, a lot of times it's far from it. So Mets fans, that's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. We will be back live with coverage again tomorrow, and then the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day. So until then, have a great one, folks. And as always, no matter what, let's go Mets, baby. Peace out. Thank you, guys. Appreciate the patience too with all the lagging, because I know that was a pain in the ass. Thank you.